The SEAL commander froze when he spotted her tattoo. That single moment, a flash of ink beneath a torn sleeve, would unravel buried grief and reveal a destiny neither of them could have predicted. But first, she'd have to survive the hell designed to break her. But to understand how JADA Monroe ended up at Coronado carrying ghosts no one could see, you'd have to go back 3 years to a dusty village in Syria, an IED ambush that killed 5 men, and the moment that should have killed her too.
Before we begin, click subscribe to support our growth and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and you won't want to miss them.
Let's get back to the story. Dawn had barely cracked the horizon over the Coronado Naval Amphibious Base when the buses groaned to a stop outside the SEAL Training Command. Hydraulic brakes hissed like warnings as the doors folded open, releasing a stream of recruits onto sun-baked asphalt. 43 candidates stumbled out, their faces carrying the peculiar blend of determination and terror that marked the first day of something that might break them. Among them stood JADA Monroe. At 25, she was older than the fresh-faced kids fumbling with their duffel bags around her. Her locks were wound tight in a regulation bun, her dark brown skin already gleaming with sweat in the California heat. She moved with the controlled economy of someone who'd learned to conserve energy in war zones. No wasted motion, no nervous fidgeting. Just steady, measured breathing as she joined the ragged formation assembling near the obstacle course. But beneath her composed exterior, her stomach coiled tight. 2 combat tours hadn't prepared her for this particular kind of scrutiny. From his second-floor office window, Commander Marcus Hale surveyed the new arrivals with the detached precision of a man who'd spent 22 years separating warriors from pretenders. His storm-gray eyes swept across the formation, cataloging potential failures, troublemakers, and the rare few who might actually earn the trident pinned above his own heart. The scar bisecting his left cheek, a souvenir from Fallujah, caught the morning light as he leaned closer to the glass. Then his gaze stopped. The woman near the back of the formation stood differently than the others. Her posture spoke of prior service, though her file indicated Army, not Navy. Something about the set of her shoulders, the way she held her head, triggered a feeling he couldn't name. Familiar, somehow. Unsettling. He checked the roster in his hand. Monroe J. JADA felt the weight of dozens of stares as she locked into position at attention. She'd expected this. Women attempting SEAL qualification were still rare enough to draw attention. Curiosity from some, hostility from others. She'd steeled herself for both. What she hadn't prepared for was how quickly the hostility would surface. Fantastic, came a voice from 2 rows ahead, loud enough to carry, quiet enough to avoid instructor attention. Now we're babysitting. Caleb Cole Donovan, 6'2", of sculpted muscle and barely concealed contempt. The former Texas linebacker had made his opinions about women in special operations clear during the bus ride from San Diego. Now his blonde head turned slightly, just enough to let JADA see his smirk. "Hope she doesn't slow us down when things get real," he added, drawing snickers from the men flanking him. JADA's hands tightened almost imperceptibly at her sides. She'd heard variations of this commentary throughout her Army career, first as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne, now as she pursued the dream that had survived everything Syria and Iraq had thrown at her. The program had only recently opened to women, and she was among the first to attempt the selection process that broke grown men like kindling. She kept her eyes forward and said nothing. The office door below swung open with military precision. Commander Marcus Hale stepped onto the parade ground, and conversation died like a candle snuffed underwater. At 47, he moved with the lethal grace of a man whose body remained a weapon despite 2 decades of hard use. His salt and pepper buzz cut was regulation perfect. His bearing radiated the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced. The scar only added to the aura, a reminder that he'd earned every commendation lining his office walls. "Welcome to hell," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the silent formation. No megaphone, no shouting, just absolute command. For the next 24 weeks, this place will test every fiber of your being. It will push you past what you think possible, then demand you go further. Most of you will quit. His eyes swept the formation like a blade. Some of you will get injured. A precious few might actually earn the right to call yourselves SEALs. JADA felt her heart rate climb despite her training. She'd read about this man, studied his legendary career with SEAL Team 6, memorized the tactics he developed that were now taught throughout SOCOM. That legend felt both impossibly distant and terrifyingly close. The ocean doesn't care about your background, Hale continued, beginning his walk down the line. He stopped occasionally to study a recruit more closely, his assessment clinical and merciless. The enemy won't go easy on you because you had a tough childhood or because someone hurt your feelings. In my program, there's only one standard, and it applies equally to everyone. When he reached JADA, Commander Hale paused. Up close, she could see the intelligence in those gray eyes, the way they cataloged every detail. Her posture, her scars, the rope burns on her palms from obstacle training she'd done on her own time. She maintained her rigid stance, staring straight ahead as he circled her slowly. "Monroe," he said, reading her name tape. His voice gave away nothing. Army Combat Medic. 2 tours. 82nd Airborne. A pause. Impressive record. Whether he considered that record an asset or a liability remained unreadable in his tone. "Yes, sir," JADA replied, her voice crisp. "Think you're tough enough for this?" The question carried an edge, not quite challenge, not quite dismissal. Something in between that demanded proof she hadn't yet given. "I'll give everything I have, sir." Commander Hale nodded once, a fractional movement that could have meant anything, then continued down the line. But JADA caught something in his expression as he moved past, not dismissal, but calculation. Assessment. It was more than some of the other recruits received, and she filed it away as a small victory. The first day unfolded like systematic brutality, disguised as evaluation. Physical fitness tests pushed candidates to failure. Swimming assessments in the frigid Pacific separated the confident from the competent. Basic military protocols were drilled with crushing repetition. JADA performed well, her army training served her, but she could feel resentment building like pressure behind a dam. Eyes tracked her during every exercise. Whispers followed her between evolutions. By evening mess, the fractures had deepened. JADA sat alone at one end of a long metal table, methodically working through her rations while conversation eddied around her like water around stone. Most of the men ignored her completely. A few made pointed comments, their voices pitched just loud enough to carry. "Wonder if they'll lower the standards now," someone muttered from 3 tables over. "Heard they had to install special facilities," another voice added, laughter rippling through nearby recruits. Climate-controlled and everything. JADA continued eating, her face impassive. She developed thick skin during 4 years in the Army, learned to let ignorant commentary slide off like rain. But these weren't random soldiers making jokes in a forward operating base. These were her potential teammates, the men whose lives might one day depend on her performance when bullets started flying. The weight of that reality pressed down harder than any rucksack. Caleb Cole. Donovan slid his tray onto the table across from her with deliberate force, the metal clatter drawing attention. His blue eyes glittered with challenge. "So Monroe," he drawled, leaning back in his chair like he owned the space. "What's your story? Couldn't cut it in the regular army, so you thought you'd try the real military." JADA looked up from her meal, meeting his stare without flinching. "I served my country honorably for 4 years," she said evenly. "I'm here because I want to serve at the highest level possible." "Right." Cole's laugh was cold. "This isn't about serving your country. This is about proving some feminist point, isn't it? You want to be the first woman SEAL, so you can write a book, do the talk show circuit, get your 15 minutes. Around them, conversations had quieted as other recruits tuned in. JADA felt the weight of their attention, understanding that how she handled this moment would set the tone for everything that followed. "I'm here for the same reason you are," she said quietly, holding his gaze. "To become the best warrior I can be." Cole leaned forward, his smile sharpening. "We'll see about that." This isn't some army med unit where you can hide behind the infantry when things get rough. Out here, if you can't pull your weight, people die. Jada stood, her meal only half finished. Then I guess we'll both have to make sure that doesn't happen. She walked away from the table feeling dozens of eyes boring into her back. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed satisfied that the troublesome female recruit was being put in her place. Cole's friends were already laughing, dissecting her responses for weakness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, harder tests, and probably more confrontations like this one. But tonight, Jada focused on the only thing that mattered. She was still here, still in the fight, still determined to prove she belonged among the warriors who'd earned the trident, no matter who doubted her. As she stepped out into the cooling night air, the sound of waves crashing against Coronado Beach filled the darkness. Somewhere in the shadows, Commander Marcus Hale stood watching his newest class of recruits. His eyes lingered on the woman walking alone toward the barracks, something about her triggering a memory he couldn't quite place. That sense of familiarity nagged at him as he turned back toward his office. He didn't yet know that in 3 weeks, a tattoo would reveal the truth that connected them both to the same fallen hero, or that the woman he was watching had been there when his son took his last breath. But to understand how JADA Monroe ended up at Coronado carrying ghosts no one could see, you'd have to go back 3 years to a dusty village in Syria, an IED ambush that killed 5 men, and the moment that should have killed her too. Syria, August 21st, 2018. The convoy had rolled through al-Shaddadi like a dozen others before it, routine patrol, intelligence gathering, medical outreach to win hearts and minds. Jada rode in the second vehicle, her aid bag wedged between her boots, sweat soaking through her uniform in the 110-degree heat. She remembered the children waving from doorways, the smell of bread baking, the way the dust turned golden in the late afternoon sun. Then the world exploded. The lead vehicle erupted in a column of flame and shrapnel, the IED buried so perfectly that not even the mine detector had caught it. The blast wave hit Jada's Humvee like a physical fist, flipping it onto its side. She remembered tumbling, her helmet cracking against metal, her aid bag spilling its contents across the ceiling that had become the floor. "Doc, we need you." The voice belonged to Sergeant Morrison, already dragging himself toward the burning wreckage ahead. Jada forced herself through the shattered window, glass tearing her uniform, her hands finding purchase on superheated metal. The screaming started then, the sound that would haunt her dreams for years. Captain Isaiah Hale emerged from the smoke like something out of myth, his face streaked with blood, carrying a wounded soldier over his shoulders. At 29, he was the youngest ODA team leader in the battalion, known for bringing his people home alive. "Fall back, Doc," he shouted, lowering the wounded man near her position. Second device. They always plant a second device. But Morrison was still out there. Bradley, Chun, all of them trapped in the kill zone. Jada started forward. Isaiah grabbed her arm, his gray eyes, gray like storm clouds, locking onto hers. "That's an order, Sergeant Monroe. You stay here and—" The second explosion swallowed the rest of his words. Isaiah's body hit her like a linebacker's tackle, driving her backward into the limited cover of the overturned Humvee. She felt the heat, heard the roar, and then his weight pressed down on her, shielding her from the shrapnel that shredded everything within a 30-foot radius. When the ringing in her ears subsided enough to hear, she realized he was still on top of her, not moving. "Captain." Her voice sounded distant, wrong. "Captain Hale." She rolled him over, saw the wounds, knew immediately that no amount of training could fix what the blast had done. His hand found hers, grip weakening by the second. Blood soaked through her gloves. "Tell my dad." Isaiah's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell him I was proud to serve. Tell him. I hope I made him proud." "You're going to tell him yourself," Jada lied, already applying pressure to wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding. "Stay with me, sir. That's an order." Isaiah Hale smiled, actually smiled, and then the light went out of those gray eyes. For other men died that day. Jada was the only one who made it home. Jada woke up gasping in the darkened barracks, her t-shirt soaked with sweat, her heart hammering against her ribs. Around her, other recruits slept through her nightmare, or pretended to. The red glow of the exit sign cast everything in the color of blood. August 21st, 18. 3 years, 2 months, and 9 days since Syria. The date was burned into her memory deeper than any brand. She checked her watch. 0347 hours. 93 minutes until reveille. She wouldn't sleep again tonight. She never did after the dreams. JADA slipped out of her rack and moved silently toward the head, bare feet padding across cold tile. In the mirror, her reflection looked hollowed out, haunted. She splashed water on her face, trying to wash away the phantom smell of smoke and copper. You don't get to quit, she told herself. They didn't quit. You don't either. Morning arrived with the subtlety of a flashbanged grenade. On your feet. Chief Petty Officer Reyes's voice could strip paint. If you're not on the grinder in 30 seconds, you're doing the morning run with a boat on your head. The recruits exploded into motion, a chaos of bodies, shouted curses, and desperate attempts to dress while running. JADA was already in her PT gear, lacing her boots with mechanical precision while others scrambled. Dawn painted the obstacle course in shades of orange and shadow as Chief Reyes assembled them in formation. He was a compact man, 40 years old, with a kind of weathered face that suggested he'd forgotten more about pain than most people would ever learn. Pain, he announced, pacing before them like a predator, is just weakness leaving the body. Today, we're going to expel a lot of weakness. What followed was systematic destruction disguised as physical training. Sand runs until their legs turn to rubber. Ocean swims in water cold enough to stop hearts. Obstacle courses that punished every muscle group simultaneously. Chief Reyes drove them past exhaustion into something beyond it, a place where only will kept bodies moving. JADA held steady. While men twice her size stumbled and fell, she maintained her pace. Her stroke technique in the water was textbook efficient. On the obstacle course, she attacked each challenge with controlled aggression, her army training evident in every movement. Monroe's got it, Mateo Vargas muttered to Darius Reed during a brief water break. The former Marine Scout sniper had been watching her with professional appreciation. She's not trying to beat anyone, just conquering the course. Darius nodded, catching his breath. The former D1 swimmer had noticed the same thing. Combat experience shows. She knows how to pace herself. 20 yards away, Caleb Donovan heard every word. His jaw tightened as he watched JADA complete a rope climb faster than he'd managed on his first attempt. The other recruits were starting to notice her competence, and that was unacceptable. She's slowing us down, Cole muttered to his nearby allies, loud enough to carry. Instructors are watching her instead of pushing the rest of us. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. But lies repeated often enough had a way of becoming truth. The team relay came during afternoon training, 4-person squads racing through a gauntlet of obstacles that required cooperation as much as individual skill. The final challenge was a 15-foot wall that demanded teamwork. One person climbing, another providing a boost, hands extended from above to pull teammates up. Cole positioned himself deliberately at the wall's base when JADA approached. She reached the obstacle at full speed, expecting him to clasp hands and boost her up according to standard protocol. Instead, Cole turned away, pretending to adjust his gear. "Move, Donovan," called Jenkins from above. "She's fine," Cole said. "Let her show us what she's got." For a split second, JADA considered calling him out. Then she saw Chief Reyes watching from 20 yards away, his weathered face unreadable. This was a test, not of strength, but of adaptability. She improvised. 3 running steps gave her momentum. She hit the wall at an angle, using a support beam as a foothold, then launched herself upward. Her fingers caught the top edge, muscles screaming as she pulled herself over without assistance. She beat Cole's team by 40 seconds. From the instructor's platform, Commander Hale watched the entire sequence unfold. His expression never changed, but his eyes tracked JADA with renewed interest. That night, he'd pull her service record, studying the details he'd only skimmed before. Army Combat Medic, 82nd Airborne. Syria, Iraq. Sole survivor of ODA Team 127 ambush, August 21, 18. Received Bronze Star with Valor for actions under fire. Tattoo noted in medical file. Memorial design, upper right arm. Something about that date nagged at him. Something important he couldn't quite place. The rope incident happened during the obstacle course's final evolution. 60 feet of braided cord stretched toward the sky, the kind of climb that turned forearms to concrete and revealed who'd been lying about their pull-up counts. JADA approached it with the same controlled intensity she'd shown all day, her technique efficient despite accumulated fatigue. She was 30 feet up when Cole started his own climb on the adjacent rope. What happened next could have been an accident, could have been fatigue affecting his grip. But the way Cole's rope suddenly jerked sideways, slamming into JADA's line and sending violent oscillations through the braided cord, that was deliberate. JADA's grip loosened. Her body swung wide, right arm scraping against the rope hard enough to tear through skin. Blood bloomed through her sleeve as she arrested her slide, every muscle in her core engaged to stop the fall. Below, Chief Reyes had gone very still. "Monroe, you good?" "Good, Chief," JADA called down, her voice steady despite the pain screaming up her arm. She completed the climb, blood dripping from her elbow, each hand-over-hand movement leaving red smears on the rope. When she reached the top platform, Reyes was waiting. "That needs medical attention, recruit." "I can continue, Chief." Reyes studied her for a long moment, noting the controlled breathing, the way she stood despite obvious pain. "Then move out. Get it cleaned and bandaged before evening formation." "That's not a request." "Aye, Chief." From the sideline, Commander Marcus Hale observed the exchange in silence. The way she'd handled the sabotage, because he'd seen what Donovan had done, even if he couldn't prove intent, reminded him of someone. That same stubborn refusal to quit, the same steel underneath. It reminded him of Isaiah. The thought sent an unexpected spike of pain through his chest, sharp enough that he turned away before anyone could see his expression crack. That night, alone in the barracks head, JADA cleaned the blood from her arm under fluorescent lights that made everything look surgical and cold. The wound was superficial. It would heal, but it burned like fire. As she worked, her tattoo caught the light. The phoenix rising from the medic's caduceus seemed to glow in the harsh illumination, the date underneath rendered in crisp black numerals. 082118. The same date that appeared in Commander Hale's personnel file, marked in red under family status. Son Kia. But neither of them knew that yet. All JADA knew was that the ghosts had followed her to Coronado, and they wouldn't leave until she proved that their sacrifice meant something. All Commander Hale knew was that something about Monroe unsettled him in ways he couldn't name, and that tomorrow he'd start finding out why. Week 3 arrived with the grinding inevitability of a glacier, slow, relentless, crushing everything in its path. The log carry exercise was designed to test teamwork under duress. For recruits, one 200-pound timber beam, a quarter-mile obstacle course that included sand pits, low crawls, and chest-high barriers. Success required synchronization. Failure meant injury. Chief Reyes assigned the teams with deliberate randomness. When he called out Monroe, Donovan, Vargas, Jenkins, JADA felt her stomach tighten. Mateo Vargas caught her eye and gave a subtle nod. "I've got your back." Jenkins, the quiet Montana recruit, looked uncertain but not hostile. Cole smiled like a wolf scenting blood. "Let's see what you've got, Doc," he said as they positioned themselves at the log's corners. Cole front right, Vargas front left, Jenkins rear right, JADA rear left. The weight settled onto their shoulders like a physical embodiment of all the pressure that had been building for 3 weeks. JADA's injured arm screamed in protest, barely healed from a rope incident, but she set her jaw and matched the rhythm as they began moving. For the first 100 yards, it worked. 4 people, 1 unit, breathing synchronized. Then they reached the barrier. On 3, Vargas called. "Lift." 1, 2. Cole shifted his grip. It was subtle, a fractional adjustment that threw off the entire balance. The timber lurched sideways, Jenkins lost his hold, and 200 pounds of wood beam crashed downward, missing JADA's foot by inches. If it had landed, it would have shattered bone. The log hit the sand with a thud that echoed across the training ground. "Damn it, Martinez," Cole shouted, loud enough for every instructor and recruit within 50 yards to hear. "Told you she couldn't hack it. Can't carry her weight. Almost got us all injured." Something inside JADA snapped. 3 weeks of harassment. 3 years of survivor's guilt. 3 hours of sleep and the ghost of a gray-eyed captain who died so she could live. It all crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. Her right cross caught Cole square on the jaw, with every ounce of combat training and pent-up rage behind it. He went down hard, his head bouncing off the packed sand, blood exploding from his split lip. The training ground fell silent except for the distant crash of waves and Cole's groaning. Every recruit, every instructor within sight had witnessed it. JADA stood over him, chest heaving, knuckles split, and bleeding. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Chief Reyes's whistle pierced the air, and the world resumed motion. Instructors converged on the scene. Recruits backed away, creating a circle of empty space around the confrontation. Commander Marcus Hale appeared as if materializing from nowhere, his face carved from stone. He looked at Cole, still struggling to sit up, blood streaming down his chin. Then his storm-gray eyes fixed on JADA with an intensity that could have melted steel. "Monroe." His voice was dangerously quiet. "My office. Now." The walk across the compound felt like a condemned prisoner's final march. JADA's combat boots crunched against gravel, each step carrying her closer to the end of everything she'd fought for. Behind her, she could hear Cole milking the injury for maximum sympathy, his friends already constructing the narrative that would justify her dismissal. Ahead, Hale's office waited like a judgment chamber. She'd known this moment might come, had prepared herself for the possibility that she'd have to defend herself eventually. But she'd imagined being smarter about it, more strategic. Instead, she'd let Cole manipulate her into exactly the kind of public explosion that would end her career. Commander Hale held the door open, his expression unreadable. JADA stepped inside. The office was Spartanly furnished, military efficiency over comfort. A metal desk dominated the center, flanked by 2 chairs that had seen decades of use. The walls told the story of a warrior's life. Commendations from 3 wars, photographs from deployments across hostile continents, a faded American flag in a shadow box. And on the shelf behind his desk, a folded flag in a triangular case. The kind presented at military funerals. JADA stood at attention in front of his desk, blood drying on her knuckles, her entire future balanced on whatever came next. Hale closed the door. The click of the latch sounded final. "Striking a fellow recruit," he said, moving behind his desk, but not sitting. "That's automatic dismissal. No exceptions. No appeals. You know this." "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Hale studied her with those penetrating gray eyes, the same eyes that had been tracking her since day one, cataloging every movement, every response. Looking for something he couldn't name. "Donovan has been a problem since week 1, Hale continued, surprising her. "Disruptive to unit cohesion. Borderline insubordinate. Lacks the emotional control necessary for special operations." JADA kept her eyes fixed on the flag behind his head, unsure where this was going. "But we have protocols," Hale said. "Regulations. Proper channels. And one of those regulations states clearly that physical altercations between recruits result in immediate separation from the program." Her heart sank. This was it, a lecture about following procedures, followed by her discharge papers. However, the word made her eyes snap back to his face. "There are provisions for commanding officer discretion in cases involving self-defense." Hale gestured to the chair. "Sit down, Monroe. Tell me about your service record." Confused but obedient, JADA sat. "Sir, Army Combat Medic, 82nd Airborne. 2 deployments. Bronze Star with Valor. I want details." As JADA began recounting her service history, Hale listened with the focused intensity of a man searching for something specific. When she mentioned Syria, his posture changed almost imperceptibly. "Show me your arm," he said abruptly. Sir. The injury from yesterday's rope climb. Show me. JADA rolled up her sleeve, revealing the bandaged rope burn that covered her upper arm. The wound was healing, but the gauze couldn't fully conceal what lay beneath it. Hale's eyes locked onto her upper arm. His entire body went rigid. The tattoo was partially visible beneath the bandage, the phoenix rising from the medic's caduceus, wings spread in defiance of death. And below it, in stark black numerals, 082118. Where did you get that? His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, rough with something that sounded like grief. JADA looked down at the tattoo that had become part of her skin 3 years ago. It's a memorial, sir. For my team. They died in Syria. August 21st, 2018. The color drained from Hale's face. His hands gripped the desk edge so hard his knuckles went white. What team? The question came out strangled. Special Forces, ODA Team 127, sir. We were conducting a village patrol when she stopped, seeing his expression. Sir, are you all right? What was your team leader's name? Each word seemed to cost him something. Captain Isaiah Hale, sir. JADA's voice softened, memory flooding back. He was an exceptional officer. Led from the front. Always put his men first. She paused, the next words difficult even after 3 years. He saved my life that day. The silence that followed was absolute. Commander Marcus Hale stared at her as if seeing a ghost, or maybe seeing clearly for the first time. His professional composure shattered like glass. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion he'd kept buried for 3 years. Captain Isaiah Hale was my son. The words hit JADA like a physical blow. The resemblance she'd noticed but couldn't place. The gray eyes, the set of the jaw, the way certain expressions flickered across his face. It all made terrible, perfect sense. Sir, she began, but he held up a hand. Tell me what happened. It wasn't a command. It was a father's plea. Tell me about that day. So she did. She told him about the IEDs, the chaos, the screaming. About how Isaiah had pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles while bleeding from his own injuries. About his final order for her to fall back, and how he'd tackled her to safety when the second device detonated. About the wounds that no amount of medical training could fix, and the way his hand had gripped hers as the light left his eyes. He said to tell his father he was proud to serve, JADA whispered, tears streaming down her face now. He said he hoped he'd made you proud. Commander Hale turned away, his shoulders shaking. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed since the funeral. I never knew, he said. The report said there was one survivor, but they kept your name classified. I thought. He couldn't finish. I requested anonymity, sir. I didn't want to be known as the woman who survived while heroes died. I just wanted to honor them by continuing to serve. Hale turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw past the legendary commander to the grieving father underneath. My son was right to save you, he said quietly, his voice raw but steady. Now prove he didn't die for nothing. The news of Caleb Donovan's expulsion spread through the remaining recruits like wildfire. By morning formation, Cole's rack was stripped, his locker emptied, and 26 candidates stood where 27 had been the day before. Chief Reyes offered no explanation beyond Donovan has been removed from the program for conduct violations, but the message was clear. The old rules had changed. What surprised JADA most wasn't Cole's departure. It was what came after. During the morning run, Mateo Vargas fell into stride beside her. About time someone stood up to that asshole, he said quietly. Then louder, keep that pace, Monroe. Looking strong. Jenkins approached her at breakfast, awkward but sincere. What Donovan did during the log, Carrie. I should have said something. Should have had your back. Water under the bridge, JADA replied. No, it's not. Jenkins's jaw set with new determination. We're supposed to be a team. If we can't trust each other here, how are we going to function downrange? Even Darius Reed, who'd kept his distance for 3 weeks, nodded to her during rope drills. Solid technique, Monroe. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Commander Hale had done something. said something to the instructors, or perhaps just changed his own bearing toward her, and the entire compound had recalibrated overnight. The harassment didn't just diminish. It evaporated like morning fog under sunlight. But JADA knew the real test still lay ahead. Week 5 brought the maritime phase, and with it, the evolution that broke more candidates than any other. The solo night navigation swim. The evening before the exercise, JADA was summoned to Training Room 3. Commander Hale stood before a large nautical chart spread across the tactical planning table. Various markers and coordinates noted in precise military shorthand. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression had softened since their conversation 3 days ago. The grief was still there, but it was tempered now with something else. Purpose, perhaps. Or redemption. "Monroe," he said without preamble, "tomorrow night, you'll face your greatest test. 2 miles out to a predetermined coordinate. Retrieve an objective. Return. No assistance beyond the distant Overwatch boat." "Yes, sir." JADA's mouth went dry just thinking about it. Hale moved around the table, his fingers tracing the route on the chart. Most candidates struggle with the psychological aspects. Being alone in dark water, unable to see what's beneath you, relying solely on compass and dead reckoning. The ocean plays tricks on your mind. "I understand, sir." He looked at her, then really looked at her, and for a moment she saw not the legendary SEAL commander, but the father still learning to live with loss. "My son was an exceptional swimmer," Hale said quietly. "State champion, could handle any conditions. But even he failed this test the first time. The fear got to him. The isolation, the doubt." He paused, his voice dropping. "Don't make the same mistake he did. When the fear comes, and it will come, trust yourself. You've already survived worse than dark water." The words settled over her like a blessing. "Yes, sir." Dismissed Monroe. "Get some rest." Then softer. "Isaiah would tell you the same thing. You don't quit, document. You adapt." JADA's breath caught. Those were Isaiah's exact words, spoken to her during a firefight in Helmand Province when everything had gone sideways. Words she'd carried through 3 years of nightmares and doubt. Hale noticed her reaction and nodded once. "He wrote about you, you know, in his letters home. The doc who never quits. He didn't give your name, but he mentioned you more than once." A ghost of a smile. "Now I understand why. The Pacific Ocean at night was a living void. No moon, no stars, just endless black water stretching toward infinity, swallowing light and sound and hope with equal indifference." The Overwatch boat cut its engines a quarter-mile from the drop point, and one by one, candidates rolled backward into darkness. When JADA's turn came, she stood at the edge, looking down into water so dark it resembled the space between stars. The objective was simple in concept. Swim 2 miles northwest to a floating marker, retrieve a waterproof container, return to pickup. In practice, it meant navigating by compass alone through potentially hostile waters while fighting exhaustion, cold, and the primal terror of isolation. "Monroe, you're up," the crew chief called. She checked her compass, bearing one final time, took 3 deep breaths to slow her racing heart, and rolled backward into the abyss. The cold hit like a physical blow despite her wetsuit. The sensation of entering that vast emptiness immediately disoriented her. No up, no down, just freezing darkness pressing in from all sides. She surfaced, got her bearings, and began swimming toward coordinates she couldn't see. The first mile went smoothly. Her stroke rhythm was steady, her compass bearing consistent. The mechanics of swimming provided comfort, something concrete to focus on while the ocean whispered its lies around her. But as she moved farther from the boat, the psychological warfare began. Every shadow became a threat. Each brush of seaweed against her legs felt like fingers reaching from below. Her rational mind knew shark attacks were statistically negligible, but the primitive fear centers of her brain weren't interested in statistics. "You're alone," the fear whispered. "Miles from help. Anything could be beneath you. Anything." JADA forced herself to focus on technique. Breathe every third stroke. Keep head position consistent. Trust the compass. halfway to the objective, fog rolled in from the west, thick, suffocating, reducing visibility to inches. The floating marker she'd been using as a distant reference point disappeared. Her compass needle seemed to waver more than before, and she wondered if the cold was affecting her fine motor control or if she was genuinely losing her heading. The objective marker finally appeared as a dim glow through the fog. Relief flooded through her as she retrieved the waterproof container from the buoy. Stage 1 complete. Then she turned to begin the return swim, and the real test began. Now she was truly alone, miles from safety with nothing but her own endurance to carry her home. The fog thickened until she couldn't see her own hand extended in front of her face. The swells grew larger, making it nearly impossible to maintain her bearing. And beneath everything, the cold was beginning to win. Despite her wetsuit, prolonged exposure was overwhelming her body's ability to maintain core temperature. Her thinking grew fuzzy. She caught herself swimming north instead of east, a navigational error that could send her out to sea instead of toward shore. "You're lost," the fear said. "You're going to die out here, alone in the dark, and they won't even find your body." JADA stopped swimming and floated on her back, trying to calm her racing heart. The smart thing would be to activate her emergency flare and call for rescue. But that meant failure, dismissal, everything she'd fought for dissolving into nothing. She thought about Isaiah, about the courage it must have taken to throw himself on that grenade knowing he wouldn't survive. She thought about Commander Hale waiting on the pickup boat, wondering if she had what it took to honor his son's sacrifice. She thought about the 5 men who died in Syria so she could have a second chance at life. You don't quit, document. You adapt. Isaiah's voice, clear as if he were swimming beside her in the darkness. JADA rolled back to swimming position, checked her compass one more time, and chose to trust it. If the reading was wrong, she'd fail. If it was right, she'd survive. Either way, she wasn't giving up. Stroke by stroke, she pushed through the fear. The fog remained thick, her compass continued wavering. Hypothermia sapped her strength with every passing minute. But she kept swimming, kept trusting, kept adapting when conditions changed. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to improve. The water felt slightly warmer, suggesting shallower coastal areas. The sound of breaking waves became more distinct, coming from a consistent direction. And through the fog bank, she caught the faint glow of shore lights. Still distant, but there. Hope replaced despair, and her stroke rate increased. She was going to make it. Against odds, against fear, against everything the ocean had thrown at her, she was going to complete the mission. The fog began to thin as she approached the pickup zone. Through the wisps of vapor, she could see the Overwatch boat's running lights positioned exactly where they should be. And standing at the rail, silhouetted against the dim glow, Commander Marcus Hale. He'd been there the entire time, waiting, watching, ready to coordinate rescue if necessary, but hoping she'd find the strength to finish on her own. Strong hands pulled her from the water onto the deck. JADA collapsed to her knees, exhaustion finally overwhelming her now that safety was assured. Her body shook uncontrollably from cold and adrenaline, and she could barely form words through chattering teeth. "Time," she managed. 2 hours, 41 minutes, the crew chief announced. "Within parameters." "Well done, Monroe." Commander Hale approached and knelt beside her. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, but when he spoke, his voice carried a note of pride that he didn't bother to hide. And something else. Something that sounded like healing. "Outstanding work, Monroe." His voice broke slightly on the words. "You held your bearing through some of the worst conditions we've seen this season." JADA looked up at him, still shivering but feeling warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "My son would have said the same thing," Hale continued quietly, his storm gray eyes glistening in the boat's running lights. "He'd be proud of you, Monroe. As proud as I am." The crew chief handed her warming blankets and hot coffee, but JADA barely noticed. She'd passed the test, not just the swim, but something deeper. She'd conquered the ocean, yes, but more importantly, she'd proven to herself that when faced with genuine terror and the temptation to quit, she could find reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. As the boat headed back to shore, Commander Hale stood at the rail, staring out at the black water that had tested his son years ago and this young woman tonight. Both had faced the same darkness. Isaiah hadn't made it through the first time, but he'd learned, adapted, and eventually conquered it. Just like JADA had tonight. The circle was closing. He could feel it. 24 weeks after stepping off that bus at Coronado, 12 recruits stood in dress uniform on the parade ground where it had all begun. 43 had started. 31 had quit, been injured, or failed to meet standards. The 12 who remained looked like different people. Leaner, harder, carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of warriors who'd been tested beyond their limits and refused to break. JADA Monroe stood third in line, her dress whites crisp in the morning sun, her locks pinned in perfect regulation beneath her cover. The parade ground that had once seemed impossibly vast now felt intimate, familiar. She knew every obstacle, every yard of sand, every shadow cast by the California sun. Families filled the bleachers, mothers, fathers, siblings, wives, children. Generations who'd come to witness the moment when candidates became SEALs. JADA had no family present. Her parents had passed years ago, and she'd asked the few friends she had to stay away. This moment felt too personal, too connected to ghosts, to share with anyone who hadn't earned the right to understand. Commander Marcus Hale stood at attention on the platform, flanked by Chief Reyes and the other instructors who'd systematically destroyed and rebuilt them over 6 months. But JADA saw past the commander's stoic exterior now. She saw the father who'd lost a son and found, in some strange way, a piece of him returned through her survival. The ceremony was military efficient. Brief speeches about sacrifice, standards, and the responsibility of wearing the trident. A history of naval special warfare traced back to the underwater demolition teams of World War II. Words about brotherhood, honor, and the thin line between chaos and civilization that warriors like these defended. Then came the moment everything had been building toward. Monroe JADA, Petty Officer 2nd Class, the adjutant called. JADA stepped forward, her heart hammering despite 6 months of conditioning her body to ignore fear. This was different from any obstacle course or ocean swim. This was the culmination of a promise made in a Syrian desert 3 years ago, when a dying captain's blood had soaked through her gloves and his last words had branded themselves onto her soul. Commander Hale held the golden trident, the symbol that separated SEALs from every other warrior in the world. Up close, she could see the emotion carefully controlled behind his professional bearing. "Petty Officer Monroe," he said formally, his voice carrying across the silent parade ground. "You have completed the most demanding military training in the world. You have proven yourself worthy to serve among Naval Special Warfare's elite operators." He paused, and his voice softened almost imperceptibly. "It is my honor to award you the Navy SEAL Trident." He pinned the golden emblem above her left breast pocket, the eagle clutching a trident, pistol, and anchor. The weight of it felt both substantial and symbolic, like carrying a piece of history into the future. "Congratulations, Petty Officer Monroe." Hale's hand came up in a crisp salute. "Welcome to the teams." JADA returned the salute, her vision blurring slightly with tears she refused to let fall in front of the assembled crowd. In his gray eyes, she saw pride, not just for her accomplishment, but for what it represented. Proof that his son's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Evidence that courage and competence transcended any boundary people tried to impose. She was the third woman ever to earn the SEAL Trident. History, whether she'd wanted it or not. After the ceremony, as families swarmed the newly minted SEALs with embraces and photographs, Commander Hale found JADA standing alone near the obstacle course where Cole had sabotaged her months ago. She was running her fingers along the rope that had torn her arm, lost in memory. "Monroe." She turned, snapping reflexively to attention. Old habits. At ease. Hale approached, carrying something. An old envelope, yellowed with age, the address written in neat handwriting. "I want to give you something." He held out the envelope. JADA's name wasn't on it, but she recognized the handwriting style from the countless after-action reports she'd filed alongside Captain Isaiah Hale in Syria. Isaiah wrote this before his final deployment, Hale said quietly. He was superstitious about certain things. Always wrote letters just in case, to me, to his friends, to his team. His voice roughened. This one was addressed to the medic who'll watch my back. I found it in his effects after the funeral. Never opened it. Never knew who it was meant for. He pressed the envelope into her hands. Until now. Jada's fingers trembled as she carefully opened the seal, trying not to damage paper that had waited 3 years to deliver its message. Inside, a single page, dated 2 weeks before the ambush that killed him. To my guardian angel in uniform. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry for that. Sorry you had to see the worst of war. Sorry you couldn't save me despite everything you know, everything you've sacrificed to learn. But I need you to understand something. You did your job perfectly. Combat medics carry an impossible burden. The weight of lives that can't always be saved. The guilt of surviving when others don't. I've watched you work miracles under fire, bringing warriors back from the edge when any rational person would have given up. Thank you for keeping us alive so we can go home to our families. Thank you for carrying scars we'll never see, for making impossible choices in impossible moments, for adapting when everything goes wrong. If I don't make it back, tell my dad I was proud to serve. Tell him I hope I made him proud. And tell him that the medic who had my back was the best damn warrior I ever served with, regardless of rank or gender or any other bullshit people use to measure worth. You're a guardian angel with a rifle and an aid bag. Don't ever forget that. Stay strong, document. You don't quit, you adapt. Captain Isaiah Hale. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable, streaming down Jada's face as the words blurred on the page. 3 years of survivor's guilt. 3 years of wondering if she'd done enough, if she deserved to live when 5 men had died. All of it answered in Isaiah's careful handwriting. You did your job perfectly. Commander Hale stood beside her, his own eyes glistening. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he did something unprecedented. He saluted her again, not as commander to subordinate, but as father to the woman who'd been with his son in those final moments. You've earned more than the trident, Monroe, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've earned peace. For both of you. Jada returned the salute, her hand steady despite the tears. He was right to save me, sir. I've tried to honor that every day since. I know. Hale's hand dropped, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled, genuinely warmly, the way a father might smile at a daughter he was proud of. My son had good instincts about people. He saw what you were capable of before anyone else did. He gestured to the trident on her chest, gleaming gold in the afternoon sun. That symbol means you're part of something bigger now. A brotherhood, he corrected himself, a family that transcends everything else. Isaiah is part of that family forever. And now so are you. As Commander Hale walked away toward the waiting families, Jada stood alone on the parade ground where her journey had begun 24 weeks ago. She folded Isaiah's letter carefully and placed it in her pocket, right next to her heart. Then she rolled up her sleeve and looked at the tattoo that had connected 2 grieving souls across years and miles and shared loss. The phoenix rising from the medic's caduceus, wings spread in defiance of death. The date beneath it, 082118, no longer felt like a brand of guilt. It felt like a promise kept. She touched the ink gently, feeling the raised texture of the scar tissue beneath. The phoenix, reborn from fire. The guardian angel who'd survived when others hadn't, not through luck, but through courage, skill, and the stubborn refusal to quit when quitting would have been easier. Behind her, Mateo Vargas called out, Monroe, we're heading to the beach. First beers as seals. You coming? Jada looked back at her fellow graduates, 11 warriors who'd proven themselves through the same hell she'd conquered. Her new family, forged in fire and ice and the black waters of the Pacific. Yeah, she called back, letting a smile break across her face for the first time in months. I'm coming. As she walked toward her team, the California sun warm on her shoulders and the trident heavy over her heart, Jada Monroe understood something fundamental. She hadn't come to Coronado to make history. She'd come to honor the dead, to prove worthy of the sacrifice that had saved her life, to earn the right to call herself a warrior among warriors. But history had found her anyway. The first woman Navy SEAL from the 82nd Airborne. The medic who survived an IED ambush and refused to let trauma define her. The warrior who punched through prejudice, conquered the ocean's darkness, and earned the respect of a legendary commander by embodying everything his son had believed she could become. She didn't come to make history, but she'd made it nonetheless, one stroke, one obstacle, one impossible test at a time. And somewhere beyond the veil of memory and loss, JADA liked to think Captain Isaiah Hale was smiling, proud of the guardian angel who'd never quit, who'd adapted when everything went wrong, and who'd finally found peace on the other side of fire. She didn't come to make history, but history found her anyway. Thank you for watching. If JADA's story moved you, of courage, sacrifice, and rebirth, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more powerful stories that remind us what it truly means to rise above the odds. Thank you.